Hello and welcome to Horrific Tales. In this show we celebrate the creation of independent authors and aspiring writers. Please like and subscribe and share these episodes so we can help our talented friends get as much exposure as possible. We would also appreciate it if you could support our artists by following them on their individual platforms and by purchasing their works. Details on how to do this are in the episode description. In this horrific tale, two brothers on the battlefields of World War I encounter something more than they bargained for. Join us now as we present The Death of Conscience by Fred Petford. Dawn. British lines near Delville Wood, northern France, 9th of August, 1916. The deafening barrage that had been falling onto the German lines through the night died away, and the two young men pressed together in the crowded trench looked at each other. It was a snatched moment of calm and connection and a sudden, shocking silence. They knew what came next. "Get ready!" A sergeant behind them bawled. His cry was taken up by others, their shouts fading into the distance over the shadowy sea of helmets and fixed bayonets that filled the front line as far as the eye could see in both directions. Colonial twang of South African accents sounded from men further down the line. The older of the two men was aged 21, dark-haired and blue-eyed, with a sardonic smile. His brother was 2 years younger and had his mother's blonde curly hair, a good-looking boy. They shook hands as they had done many times in the last year. "Good luck then, mate. Try to stick together, but if not, I'll see you in Berlin." A sly grin cracked in the older brother's face. "Don't worry, we'll be back poaching Langford trout by Christmas." A whistle sounded in the distance, then another, and another. A fresh-faced 19-year-old lieutenant climbed into the ammunition box and turned towards him as, with a great roar, the newly arrived South African troops surged towards their ladders. He blew long and hard on his own whistle and shouted, "Come on then, up we go, lads! Don't let the colonials get all the glory! Onward, the Oxfords! Follow me!" He then turned, pulled his revolver out of his holster and climbed. Grim-faced and shoulder to shoulder, the men shuffled towards the ladders. Some prayed, others cried, but there was no hesitation, no shirking. Death waited for many of them, they knew that, but they went anyway. "It won't be me. Not this time." Up above, the chatter of German machine guns started, and so did the screaming. An hour later, what remained of the Oxford Light Infantry was retreating under heavy fire. They managed to penetrate the barbed wire and reach the German front line in the shattered remnants of Delville Wood, and, in hand-to-hand fighting, pushed the Foot Guard regiment that opposed them back towards their supply lines. But a strong counter-attack had forced them to give ground, and they were now exposed in no man's land. The older brother wriggled past a shattered tree stump as trench mortar rounds exploded around him. There were bodies everywhere, and he saw the lieutenant who had led them up the ladders lying on his back, apparently uninjured, but clearly dead. Cursing, he got to his feet and sprinted, bent over through the sucking mud towards the shell hole 10 yards away. 10 yards closer to safety. "Come on, keep going." A bullet plucked at his sleeve, and he threw himself forward head first. The hole was 30 feet wide and half filled with water, and he frantically dug his feet into the slime to stop his slide. Men drowned in shell holes. Momentarily safe from the bullets, he lay on his back and took stock. He reckoned it was another 100 yards to the British lines, and wondered whether his best bet would be to wait until nightfall. There were hours to go, but at least he'd get back. He cleared his rifle barrel of mud, lighted a cigarette and looked around. There were 2 bodies with him. One was lying half in the water with an arm missing. He turned to look at the other, and his blood ran cold. He knew straight away, just by the shock of blonde curly hair showing beneath the helmet. Dropping his rifle, he slid over and pulled the man onto his back. "Oh, mate, what have they done to you?" he whispered, the words carried away by the gunfire, and screaming drifted over the battlefield. His beloved younger brother had taken a cluster of machine gun bullets to his chest. He counted them. 4 in all, from top right to bottom left. Death would have been instantaneous. He slid his arms around the body and held him close. and, as the sounds of the battle faded from his mind, he raised his head and howled like an animal, raw with grief. And, a mile away, a dark and ancient thing that haunted the battlefields and fed upon death and pain noticed and turned towards him. Because of all the human emotions, it was utter despair that made a man's soul most vulnerable. Invisible to all, the wraith crossed the shattered ground in seconds. It approached the man cautiously and watched as he held his brothers, eyes closed and keening. Then it slipped past his defences and buried himself close to his heart, unseen and unnoticed, an evil parasitic presence that would feed on his soul and weaken and corrupt it so that in the end death would come, and the crying man would be like he was. The long hours of daylight slipped past, but for the soldier in the shell hole time had stopped, and still he cried. The last vestiges of hope and humanity were leaving him. His friends from the village were there one moment and gone the next. Strong, vibrant men, blown to pieces in shell bursts, or left jerking on a murderous barbed wire as German machine gun bullets rippled into them. 4 men he knew of, the last just a few hours earlier. As the remnants of the Oxford had burst into the German trenches in a killing fury, the guard had come running round the corner, almost straight into his bayonet. All he had to do was thrust forward. As though astonished at his temerity, the man had met his eyes, then silently pitched forward into the mud. As dusk fell, he eyed the man with his legs in the pool. He recognised him vaguely from over Whitney Way. Unbidden, an idea came to him. He slid down in the water and unbuttoned the dead private's uniform. Slipping his fingers inside, he grasped his identity tags and eased them over his head. He read the name, Nathaniel Downs. He quickly changed his own tags with the dead privates. Then he rifled his uniform pockets and swapped their paybooks, letters from home, and 1 or 2 other personal possessions, including an engraved cigarette case and lighter. When he had finished, he studied the man carefully. The poor sod even looked a bit like him. 2 brothers who died together in the same shell hole. Tragic. He might even get a mention in the Oxford Evening Echo. Heart beating with a strange, wild exhilaration, he crawled to the rim of the shell hole and peered cautiously towards the German trenches. Nothing stirred in the darkness, but as he turned to look back at the British lines, he saw a line of men slowly moving forwards, crouching and wriggling alternatively. The leaders were only 20 feet away. Christ, they're coming back for more. Left with no choice, he played dead, lying on his front to hide his face. He sensed the movement and he heard a whispered exchange right next to him, barely more than breath in the air. How far now, do you think, Sergeant? We're halfway, I reckon, sir. All quiet so far, then. Follow me. There was a quiet sucking of mud as the line of men slid into the night. The new Nathaniel Downs barely noticed. The men had Scottish accents. They must have pulled the Oxford out during the day. His heart leapt. Back in the trenches, no one would know his face. He turned to look at his dead brother one last time and whispered, "Goodbye, mate. Don't worry. We both know who needs to pay for this. I'll set things straight." With that, he eased himself over the rim of the shell hole, and off he sat on his stomach across the mud, his rifle slung across his back. 15 minutes later, he slid into the British frontline trench, having narrowly avoided being shot by a sentry peering through the slit between 2 sandbags. "Jeez!" the kilted private exclaimed in a broad Scots. "It's a wee mud, baby! I nearly put a bullet in your head, son! Where'd you come from then?" "I'm with the Oxfords. I got stuck in a shell hole and had to wait till dark before getting back." The sentry resumed his position, both eyes glued to the slit that looked out over no man's land. "Aye, well, they pulled you back," he said out of the corner of his mouth. "He's right." A lieutenant appeared out of the gloom. "There have been a few stragglers. You need to head up to the supply trench and make your way to the Wellington Reserve Camp. Ask at the command post at the Eeps to the Lille Road. They'll direct you. Try to clean yourself up as well, man. I can barely see your uniform and your face is covered in mud." Saluting, and only too happy to be on his way, the private walked to the junction with the trench. It ran westwards away from the front line. As he did so, a volley of shots and shouting carried out over the German lines, and a flare burst high in the sky. Machine guns started firing as he hurried away into the night. For the next half hour he worked his way through multiple layers of defensive trenches. There were soldiers everywhere, and he was challenged a couple of times, but his story was accepted without question, and no one asked his name. Finally, he climbed up the ground level and arrived on what was left of the main road. He stood for a moment and looked around the god-forsaken landscape. The ground had changed hands 3 times, and only shattered tree stumps, the sandbag mounds of defensive strongpoints and mud were left. In the moonlight, the pockmarked road lay 30 feet ahead of him, and a large column of troops wearing South African bush hats were approaching from his left. He ducked back into the trench and let them pass, then re-emerged. He stared to his right as the sound of the engine carried across the wasteland. The faint light of a headlamp slit showed on the road, and he watched it seem to come to a stop next to a ruined building. He stirred as the moon came out from behind a cloud and revealed a motorbike dispatch rider wearing a long leather coat, standing on a shelter of the one remaining wall. There was a brief flare of the match as he lighted a cigarette. No one stops a dispatch rider. Barely aware of what he was doing, he drew his razor-sharp bayonet from his scabbard, and, concealing it up against his leg, he walked over. "Evening, mate. Got a spare fag?" he asked. "Blimey, what happened to you?" the rider asked, as he felt in his chest pocket of his coat. "I got lost in the push yesterday, just trying to find my regiment again." The man nodded. It was hardly an unfamiliar story. He handed the packet over, and, as he looked down at his pocket, he felt for a match. The soldier drove the bayonet into his neck and wrenched it to one side. The rider stared at him in astonishment, choked briefly, and died standing up. And deep inside the mud-covered soldier, the wraith rejoiced, and took one bite out of his soul. Shortly afterwards, Nathaniel Downs, dispatch rider, was driving carefully towards Ypres, and the junction of the road to Paris. 2 weeks later, there was a knock on the door of the modest home in Whitney. Mrs. Downs opened to see a grave-faced telegram boy standing there. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached out and took the small buff-coloured envelope. She ripped it open and read the contents of the form, turning to her husband who had appeared from the garden. "Missing. Believed killed," she whispered. "Who?" he asked. "Nat. My darling Nat." The Downs family had 3 sons in France. The other 2 survived the war and came home, but nothing more was ever heard about her youngest son. Mrs. Downs wondered what happened to him every day, until she died. Well, we hope that you enjoyed our latest horrific tale. If you want to keep up to date with future episodes, then subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow our social media pages. You can also give the channel support by visiting our merchandise store and picking up some of our items. We would also appreciate it if you took a moment to support our contributing artists, who very kindly lend their talents to the show. Check out the links in the description to see how you can do this. Well, that just leaves me to say, until next time, my friends, keep it creepy, keep it horrific.